This edition of the Global Conversation takes us to Germany as the country prepares to elect a new Bundestag. Moaning on a high level, that's what people who complain about problems in this rich country are accused of. The economy is prospering, the unemployment rate is the second lowest in the EU. The pressure is on, however, on issues like the gap between rich and poor, gender inequality in the labour market, and the need to integrate hundreds of thousands of newly arrived immigrants. We will manage was Angela Merkel's mantra back in 2015 when she opened the doors to 1 million refugees. The Chancellor received both praise and criticism for her decision. Was Germany taking on too much, or has it long been a country of immigration? We talked to writer and activist Marinic about immigration and integration, perhaps the biggest challenge Germany is facing. Marinic, you were born in the south of Germany. Your parents were immigrants from Croatia. You're a publicist and head of the International Welcome Center's intercultural section in Heidelberg. Welcome to the Global Conversation.
Welcome in Heidelberg.
In 2016, Germany took on more refugees than any other EU country. What challenges will the new administration face?
Well, first of all, it'll have to form a government. We called Angela Merkel's pro-refugee policy the summer of welcome. It was extraordinary. She's always defended her decision, even throughout the election campaign. We saw all these pictures of Germany, of people fleeing their countries, and it was very admirable the way Germany behaved. I believe it's the government's responsibility not to squander this positive spirit, which we felt at the time, not to let down the people who made it happen, and to carry it on in the future.
In 2015, people hailed the decision to welcome the refugees. People were actively involved, but a year later they started to have doubts. According to one survey, 86% of the population was preoccupied with immigration. How can one convince the people of Germany that theirs is a land of immigration?
We've had recruitment agreements with guest workers for the past 65 years. This was something Mrs. Merkel was celebrating. People were born and raised here. They have German passports, they're German citizens, and they're part of the country. We shouldn't always be looking back. It's important to allow these second and third generation Germans like me to belong.
Why hasn't that been the case until now?
I used to say that it's because of Chancellor Helmut Kohl's policy of appeasement. The CDU was clever enough to say that we opened the doors to migrants because the economy needed them. He let in 16 million people. Millions of them went back to their home countries because they didn't settle down in Germany. They wanted to earn a bit of money and then go back home. These are the clichés. Everybody thinks that once they're here, they won't leave anymore. The reason people don't understand that this is already a land of immigration is because they've been told for decades that these migrants are foreigners. They're aliens, their presence is tolerated, but they've never become citizens.
So what can you do about the fear of so-called excess immigration? Because that is what people are worried about.
That fear was fueled by images people saw in the media in 2016. A lot of migrants were arriving from other continents, from Africa, for example, which obviously felt very alien to a lot of people, very different to what they're familiar with. This is why people need to exchange. If a country decides to open its doors, it must ensure that the people coming in feel at home and that those already here have a chance to challenge their preconceptions.
So you believe what is needed is connections between people?
Absolutely. It's been scientifically proven that fears grow when there's no connection between people, when people have a certain idea in their mind about who the other is.
The European Commission has called on member states to work hard on improving integration to avoid the rise of parallel societies. Is there any risk of that happening in Germany?
There are other countries where parallel societies are a part of the urban landscape. When they travel to these countries, many Germans admire this and find it exciting. In New York, you stroll through Little Italy and Chinatown. There it's okay. However, in Germany, they don't want that. Well, I think the state needs to clearly identify what the freedoms are of these people when they live here and have a second culture. And it needs to identify the areas that aren't covered by the rule of law and take action accordingly. If Germany doesn't want a certain group of people to live in a particular neighbourhood of Cologne, for example, then they should restructure cities so there's a mix of population instead of letting it happen and then criticising it afterwards.
Few people in our societies seem to be aware of the fact that Germany needs migrants, because there is a lack of qualified workers, because of demographics, and because we need people to pay for future pensions.
When it comes to demographics, there is a problem. On the one hand, we say we need qualified employees, but on the other hand, we hear reports about young people who can't find work, about long-term unemployment, and about people over the age of 50 who can't find work. These people will be asking, hang on a minute, why do we need other workers if they don't need me? And these are questions that voters can and should ask the government. Only then will people understand and accept the situation. As long as there's a group of people that doesn't feel secure, it will turn against refugees.
Do you think the next government will address this issue?
The problem is that, according to a survey, 60% of society thinks the quality of life is improving, but 40% thinks that things are getting worse and that the gap between them is growing. If we don't change that, there is a danger that the gap will grow and that migrants will become the scapegoats. On the one hand, I hope that people can make the difference between the immigration of past decades and current asylum policy, for which we need to find solutions. But if we look at the success of the last 70 years, on the issue of immigration, I think other countries might wish they'd succeeded in the same way as Germany.
Vielen Dank für das Gespräch.
Ja, danke Ihnen auch.
An export champion, Germany is Europe's model student. The economy is stable and growing, a trend set to continue according to the Federal Statistical Office. At the same time, inequality and poverty are also on the rise. We find out more with the president of the Economic Research Institute IFO in Munich, Clemens Fußt. According to the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, you are Germany's most influential economist. Welcome to the global conversation. There are only 2.5 million unemployed in Germany. This is a very low figure compared to other EU member states. But is it simply the result of a redistribution of work, which means more low-paid jobs?
I have to say that among these newly created jobs, there are also millions of full-time jobs, not just precarious jobs. Don't forget that the number of unemployed has dropped by 50%. Someone who was formerly unemployed and finds a job won't necessarily start on a high salary. You start on a lower income and hope that your salary will increase. I don't agree with those who say that the fact that there are more people on a lower income today is a failure, because that's wrong. It's a success which Germany is envied for. But the price to pay for this success is that salaries in the low-income sector have risen at a slower rate than in the high-income sector. That is true.
But the reality for these people on low incomes is that the situation isn't evolving and they remain poor for longer.
Of course, it's always better to earn more than less, but the first step is to get into the job market. That's what we've achieved. Of course, we would hope that the largest number of people possible could obtain qualifications and earn appropriate salaries. But the objective is to boost productivity, to create new jobs. The road to higher wages is through better qualifications and quality work. It's not something you can regulate by law.
Many say the Hartz reforms are to blame for this poverty. Do you think adjustments need to be made to these reforms?
The Hartz reforms did indeed increase pressure on the unemployed to find a job. That was the intention. It's also been proven that people in work are happier and healthier than people out of work. For this reason, it was right to implement the reforms. Now, you can criticize them, but what would you rather, that people be unemployed? The alternative is not that these people will suddenly, as if by magic, become more productive overnight and get better jobs. Of course, that would be great, but that's not the alternative. That's why I think this criticism of the Hartz reforms is questionable. Because those who criticize them don't consider what the alternative would be if we hadn't introduced them. We would probably still have 5 million people unemployed.
But studies reveal people in Germany feel social inequalities are growing.
Well, I think there is a sense of inequality, and maybe also people are concerned about the future. There is concern among those who have jobs and who are doing well that things might change for the worse. And we know that those who don't have good qualifications are at a higher risk of becoming unemployed and have lower earning opportunities. We must therefore raise the question, does our education system only give a chance to those who are already doing well and come from middle-class and educated families? We need to figure out what needs to be done to help those who come from disadvantaged backgrounds to succeed. On this question, Germany is not doing well.
Are other EU member states performing better, and what do they do differently?
Some countries have better results when it comes to social integration. This means that people who come from educationally deprived backgrounds have better chances to climb the social ladder. It is always more difficult for these people, but there are some countries where it works better. In Scandinavia, for instance. This is because they invest more in preschool and primary school education.
Why are things changing so slowly in Germany? Why are other countries ahead on this?
Perhaps Germany realized too late what the priorities should be. There are many immigrants in Germany, and many are from educationally deprived backgrounds. There are also educated immigrants, but the majority are less qualified. This is something that Germany refused to admit for a long time. During the 1980s and 90s, Germany didn't consider itself a country of immigration. And if you don't do that, you have no strategy to integrate people.
So what do you think the new government's main challenge will be?
The next German government doesn't have one big problem, but several. First, Europe and the future of the European Monetary Union, because it is not stable. What's more, we're facing massive demographic changes over the next decade, and we're not really prepared to tackle them.
And this is why we need immigration.
Yes, this is one aspect, but immigration alone won't solve the demographic deficit. We won't escape this problem. We're also behind when it comes to digitization. All these are issues the new government needs to tackle.
Vielen Dank für das Gespräch.
Sehr gerne.
As the German economy continues to prosper, it comes as a shock that in this rich and highly developed country, women are still left behind in the workplace. According to an OECD study, men's earnings still represent 75% of the average family income. To discuss this, we're off to meet Jutta Almendinger, president of the Berlin Social Science Center. You studied sociology in Germany and abroad. You have a PhD from Harvard, and you're a professor and president of the Berlin Social Science Center. Welcome to the Global Conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
In Southern Europe, German women are seen as more emancipated. But does that reflect the truth?
No. If this is what people in the south of Europe think, then they have never been to Germany. In the south of Europe, the situation is very different. In Germany, our way of thinking and our objectives are emancipated. But when it comes to the facts, for instance, raising our children and taking care of our parents, when it comes to the difference in salaries and women in top positions, then that's not the case.
According to Eurostat, German women earn about 22% less than their male colleagues. Compared to the rest of Europe, the situation is only worse in the Czech Republic and Estonia. How is that possible in such a rich and developed country?
Nun, lassen Sie mich zunächst mal sagen, dass die 22% noch sehr...
The figure is actually worse because the 22% only applies to the hourly wage. But German women work far less than men. If you add up the part-time work and these 22% over a month, a year or a whole lifetime, they actually earn less than half as much as men, which has a terrible impact on their pension. We can see that women are now better qualified in Germany, but from the moment they have children and their partners are in well-paid jobs, then there's a negotiation within the couple to decide who will stop working. It's unbelievable how the German job market punishes people who take a break or work part-time. If you work part-time, you don't get access to middle or high management positions, and then it's too late.
Und eigentlich ist es da schon gelaufen.
Also es gibt ja mittlerweile die Frauenquote für Aufsichtsräte.
A gender quota has been put in place for supervisory boards, which is more or less met by Germany's top 100 companies. But in management positions, only 6% of managers are women.
Gerade mal 6% des Vorstands weiblich.
Natürlich müssen wir auch in diesem Bereich.
Of course, we also need to introduce gender quotas in this sector. For the past 20 years, people have been saying it's just a question of time. Women are better qualified. But now the time is up and I'm starting to get very impatient. I can also see that women in top positions have a massive influence on other women, who are then encouraged to try and get into middle and higher management jobs. They're role models, which we need.
Glauben Sie, dass die nächste Regierung das
Do you think that the next government will help make the job market more family-friendly?
Familienfreundlicher werden?
Familienfreundlicher nutzt den Frauen erstmal gar nichts. Familienfreundlicher nutzt den Frauen, erwerbstätig zu sein.
That alone won't help improve the situation for women. It will help them to get work, but it won't help them build a career. It won't help either when it comes to better sharing household work with their partner. What we need are companies that will foster women's careers and family-friendly working conditions. There's a lot more that can be done, for instance, when it comes to childcare. The fact that we don't have enough places in day schools is an urgent problem.
Es ist ein bohrendes Problem in Deutschland, dass wir keine Ganztagsplätze in der Schule beispielsweise haben.
Are people in Germany afraid of ambitious women? According to one of your assistant's findings, a woman who applies for a job 2 months after giving birth has a much lower chance of being invited to a job interview than a woman who gave birth 12 months earlier.
Ich weiß nicht, ob das Wort Angst in diesem Zusammenhang richtig ist, aber man hat halt...
Well, I don't know if afraid is the right word. However, in Germany there is this long-standing traditional notion that it's the women's job to take care of the children. But then the woman is in a no-win situation. You know, if she stays home too long, the professional drawbacks are eventually massive. But if she stays home for a shorter period of time, she gets labelled a bad mother.
Wenn man ihr dann sagt, naja, also Sie sind ja eine schlechte Mutter. Oder in diesem Moment auch noch diese Rabenmutter-Sache da bemüht.
Do you think these stereotypes are starting to break down?
Dass es mittlerweile etwas aufbricht?
Sie haben sich definitiv aufgebrochen. Wir haben wesentlich mehr Frauen im Arbeitsmarkt.
Yes, definitely. There are more and more women on the job market, but not when it comes to higher positions. It is a problem which we need to tackle. The issue was rarely mentioned during the election campaign, even though it affects every sector, from family policy to gender policy, education, social policy and employment. Perhaps we should even think about creating a ministry just for women and not for the family, youth and the elderly, etc.
Sogar ein Ministerium für Frauen dann einzurichten hätte und nicht für Alters und so weiter.
Vielen Dank. Ein familienfreundlicher
Creating a more family-friendly job market, better integration for refugees and fighting poverty. The next German government has its work cut out. That's it from the global conversation ahead of the federal elections in Germany.
In Deutschland.